So making Microsoft Teams the hub for productivity in your organization. We've got a great panel. As you can see here, just some quick introductions. I'll go from the far side down here. So we're joined by Cameron Dwyer, who's an Office Development MVP, the only Office Dev MVP that's up on stage, ladies and gentlemen. So we'll put a lot of pressure on him for those questions. He's also the CTO for One Place Solutions out of Australia. So Cameron, thanks for joining us. To his left, we have Martin Eccles, who's a Microsoft RD and Office Apps and Services MVP, like the rest of us. He's a Chief Digital Officer and Managing Partner at Portiva in the Netherlands. Welcome.
Thank you.
And then we have Jeff Willinger, Office Apps and Services MVP and Independent Consultant out of the US. And then we have Sue Hanley, another Office Apps and Services MVP and Independent Consultant and Trainer out of the US. And finally, we have Tracy Vanderskift from an Office Apps and Services MVP, Independent Consultant, Trainer, and Coach out of South Africa, out of SA. And I am Christian Buckley, so I am a Microsoft RD and MVP, Office Apps and Services, and the founder and CEO of Collab Talk out of the US. And just as by way of background of this, so a couple things just to kind of set the stage. I've got some questions that I'm going to go through, kind of set up some of the background. We do have a couple people helping out. If you have questions, at about midway, we'll start taking some questions if you have them. Otherwise, we've got a lot of things we can talk about and shared experiences from the panel. But we're going to talk about Microsoft Teams, of course. It's not just a new platform, and we'll kind of get into some feedback here, but this is, I guess, kind of a leading statement, that it's not just new technology, but it's a new way of working together. It's about team productivity and about collaboration for a lot of organizations. It is a completely new way to work and to think about all of the components that Teams gathers into this hub. And there's a lot of talk about Microsoft Teams being a hub for productivity, and so we're going to kind of talk about that. What does that actually mean? In your organization, when you talk about a productivity hub, what does that mean? So I'm just going to kick things off and let people jump in and talk, so you can take turns or interrupt each other. I'm fine with that. You're all mic'd, so just interrupt each other, especially if somebody in the center goes too long on an answer. I'm just saying, if.
I just did a session, Christian, so, was anyone just in my session a few minutes ago? Right, so, I do like to talk. But I'm a sharer.
As he's just highlighted by talking before the question was asked. All right. So let's talk about this, though, about the nature of teamwork. How has the nature of teamwork changed or evolved over the last decade, let's say?
We're also polite. I'll wait.
Well, someone is welcome to talk.
I can start. I think what you see is we are working more in teams than we did 10 years ago anyway. So there's more in project teams, departmental teams, cross-organizational teams. We're just working more in teams, and something that you see a lot these days is we are globally scattered these days, and it doesn't matter where you are anymore. So remote working and working together remotely is also something that really that works these days, right? So that's definitely a change of the way that we work together.
The anytime, any place, on any device, it's only getting more prevalent. The future of work, I see it as sort of like just that single place where you go, a big search bar and a chat bot. That's all I need. And the search has got to be a great search experience and, filled with, amazing information that is preloaded. People are like, yeah, we're experimenting with chat bots, but they stink. And I'm like, well, what are you doing? Well, we haven't done anything. It just doesn't work. Well, you have to, if you don't put in all the stuff, ahead of time, you're not going to get out stuff.
I think at first I thought it was just a South African thing until I left the country once and realized it wasn't. But that whole job security thing and that fear we have of sharing and working together was so prominent years ago. And we think that systems or companies enforce silos, but it's not. It's a human trait of being afraid to share or to be open or to show people what you do. And I think that's been a major culture change. It causes trouble as well. I mean, these type of systems, because you suddenly have transparency and you have people that share and work together and less duplicates and things, you actually have people that are suddenly afraid of people seeing that because they're imposter syndrome. So that's a big change, is where people start trusting to share who they are and work together and to work transparent. And I mean, it's incredible that Microsoft Teams allows that, but there's two sides to it. It's a big culture change for people to learn to work that way. And that's something I've definitely experienced in companies in South Africa.
It still happens. So we still see so many organizations where people think that knowledge is power and they want to keep the knowledge to themselves,
Exactly.
right? And that's something that needs to change, definitely. Yeah.
They need to see value in sharing, though, or else I'm not going to share. If there's no value in it for me sharing, I'm not going to share internally, right? With you guys, I like to share content, stuff that I'm coming up with, but if there's no value in it for me, we have to figure out what the value is.
Well, I think the value has to be that it's part of the culture, that you're recognized and rewarded for not just innovating, but also reusing. I mean, the real challenge, I think, when getting people to share is if you don't, first of all, you have to have a culture that allows people to disagree and doesn't sort of shoot them down when they share something that may not be fully baked. And then you also have to make sure that your recognition is not just because you come up with something new. You know, the point about sharing is that someone has to reuse it. And if you only recognize and reward people for things that they create new, all of this sharing not going to have a whole lot of value.
Right.
I think you just touched on a great point, too, that the main evolution, in my perspective, but what's written about, was talked about, is the cultural change and the focus. It's not that we are suddenly elevated, we're all the same. There's some companies that are much better at that. They're just culturally, they're better set up for the new way that the technology works. That's multi-geo, multi-time zone, much more flexible and dynamic, but also multimedia. You know, all of these changes that are different from even 10 years ago.
Yeah, and I think the fact of how pervasive the sharing and collaboration has become in each of those tools. Like, it used to be that we used to have to plan and schedule, and these were physical meeting spaces or telephony equipment to be able to bring those people together. But now that ability to collaborate is almost real time, no matter what your tool or the media is that you're working with. So it's really enabled that to happen sort of anywhere, anytime. And in the context of what you're doing, you don't have to stop what you're doing and then plan a collaboration setting and then bring the people in. You can do it when and where it's happening.
Of course, I'm going to add something. So on that point, which I think comes back again, is that when we don't plan or when things aren't structured, we're more creative.
Correct.
And that's a big change that I've seen, is that innovation and that creativity is definitely getting better, because you don't plan for next Monday, you're going to have a great idea, and you're going to share it with your team. You can actually, when it happens now, start sharing it. So that innovation and creativity, I think, is happening a lot faster because of how the tools are.
And interesting, so the point you made on sort of like rewarding the sharing behaviour, do you find that there's a tipping point that it comes to when individuals realise that sharing is, they get the value back, to Jeff's point? Is there sort of a tipping point in which we're finding we're having to guide that cultural change, but there comes a point where people are realising the value themselves and it sort of takes over? There's a natural takeover point in people's minds?
Well, that's the whole idea of change management. I did a project for a medical instrument company with a bunch of scientists that were real introverts. They never look at you in the eye when you walk down the hall. They work in dark spaces. They have really big screens. And you say to yourself, well, how are these people going to collaborate? Well, when we talked to them, we found out two things. They have big egos, number one, and number two, they like to see their name and their picture in lights. So what we did is we came up with a little incentive, a little game. We talk about gamification. We gamified it so that we did it through Yammer, when Yammer used to be a big thing. Of course, it's coming back. So we did it through Yammer, and we were able to, if someone posted a question, they got points. You got more points if you answered the question. If you added a picture, if you added a link, you got points for different things. And there was a little leaderboard, and we found out they're very competitive with one another, and their pictures were up there, and every day, sort of like the leaderboard on the app, it changed. people were super engaged, and all we did was give them a $25 Caribou gift card. That's like a coffee chain in the U.S., a weekly winner for $25, and then the monthly leader would get like $100 to a steakhouse. And you say to yourself, you know, sort of like when you go on a diet and you cut out carbs and you lose all this weight and you have one piece of bread and you gain it all back, you say to yourself, well, Jeff, they probably, after the contest was over, no one did it anymore. Nope. When it became part of their regular day that they would check this, even if I didn't mention you, they would still check it to see if there was anything that they could answer. And it's just a part of their everyday life. So when that happens, change happens.
Let's jump in. So I've got two more kind of broader questions before we then hone specifically into teams related. So the next one is, so in your experience, what are the core components of a hub for teamwork? So not talking about specific tools, name brands, but kind of what are the components of a hub for teamwork in the modern
I'll
organization?
take a start on that because I think it has nothing to do with technology at all. I think the most important way to create an effective team and have a hub for teamwork is to have the team members agree, how are we going to work together? What is the outcome we're trying to achieve, and how are we going to connect with one another? And I like to call that the collaboration contract. What are our expectations that we have for each other? Things like, what are we going to name our files? Where are we going to store our files? How are we going to hold each other accountable? Where do we work? How do we get that done? What are the norms for our team, for how we want to communicate? Where are we going to communicate? Are we going to use Teams? Are we going to use email? I mean, all those things that you're not allowed to say anymore. I mean, what are we going to do on our team? And it almost doesn't matter what other teams are doing, because if we agree, if we have a contract for how we're going to name our files, store our files, hold each other accountable for the behaviors that are the norms for our team, we will be successful. Our hub for teamwork is going to be wherever we want that hub to be, and it will work for the outcomes we are trying to achieve.
I think part of that, so that whole contract, I mean, I've actually looked at some of your stuff, but that whole rules of engagement nearly, and agreeing and having respect for space and what we want to achieve and things. But part of that for me as well, if we think of tools or something, is knowledge. We keep on thinking that things are intuitive, that people would just figure things out. And for me, part of that thing that needs to be in place is the fact that the people need to have the knowledge and be efficient to be able to use those tools, to feel like they can achieve something, that they are effective, that they're not wasting time. I mean, a lot of time we roll out these hub work type of things and people just become slower because we've never parted the knowledge onto them to be able to do it better and to enjoy using the environment and to work together. So the knowledge or the training or the investing, that's very important for me as well.
My rule is train teams together, and in the course of learning how to use the technology, they will start forming their collaboration contract.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anything to add?
Nothing to add.
Well, that's perfect, because Sue and Tracy, what you covered again was like the cultural aspects, because the next question was is specifically what are the principal tools and solutions that you are leveraging for your hub for teamwork today?
Over to you, boys.
Tools like Teams?
I'm just saying tools. And so Teams is a tool.
Yeah, I mean, I live on Teams. I have for, 2 years now, and more every day. Even like this panel, we had a team set up. We collaborate ahead of time. Maybe it was email, I forget. But, whatever it is, it's got to be easy to use, right? I talked in my earlier session about user experience. It's got to be easy to use. Mobile, desktop, whatever it is. So yeah, Teams, I'm a big Teams guy.
And I think it has to support not just conversations, but you have to, if you want to have meetings and you want to have remote meetings, you need to support audio and video. And interesting thing is, when I'm from the Netherlands, I'm from Europe, and whenever I start a Teams conversation, when I have a meeting, all the cameras are switched off. everywhere. It's a European thing. I don't know why. I always try to put my camera on so that I try to trigger people, hey, maybe you should switch on your camera as well. And then when I have meetings with people from the US, they always switch their camera on. So for them, it's a different, the default is different. But I like that you can see each other. And I think one of the really nice features that Microsoft Teams has released is the blur the background. Because if you ask people, why are you not switching on your camera? Yeah, I'm at home and my kitchen is not very tidy, or my office looks horrible and it's got papers all over the place.
Background.
And now you can suddenly blur that, and there is no reason for you not to switch on your camera anymore.
No, 'cause
well, maybe you have a bad hair day, but we don't care.
Right, I was just going to say, all it needs to do is take care of my hair and makeup, because 90% of the time my camera's not on, because I just got back from the gym, and everybody works remotely on my team right now, so I'm back from the gym. I have not showered. Believe me, you don't want the camera on.
The blurring background, you got to remember. So if you have a bit of longer hair like we do, it actually smooths your hair. When you blur it looks like that perfectly ironed look.
Ooh.
It does.
Well,
Makes your hair
you
look
see
better.
what's coming down. I don't think it's out yet, where you actually could choose a custom background. So it looks
Yeah.
like I'm working from the beach. I live on the beach anyway, so many times I've got my window open so you could actually see the beach. But if it's too loud, I'll close the window, and you could have different backgrounds. Is that rolled out yet?
Yeah, I think it is rolling
Okay.
out. Yeah.
It's not going to roll down to you guys, obviously, because you have the beach already, apparently. Not to those tenants.
I would say that, so one of the things, just to jump in there too, is I have a hat that I keep right next to my computer at home in my home office for those reasons too. It's like suddenly I see, because I'm the same way, it's by default I have it off, the camera off, but I'll usually, depending on who I'm meeting with, if they've got their cameras on, then I immediately turn that on, and I have the hat right there if needed, if I'm in my pajamas and I haven't taken a shower or something.
It's a good habit. If you want your team to properly work together, it's not just about, I completely agree with what we said before, Susan and Tracy, with the contract, and that you need to agree upon how you're going to work together. But also, if you then have a team meeting, so many times I know that the other team members, a couple of them are just doing their email or doing other stuff. And if you have your camera on, at least you have the feeling that you're actively participating in the team meeting.
But
so that's also something.
But there is one thing just to be aware of if you're working from home. A video is a bandwidth hog.
Yeah.
And so you can't always get a great connection if you leave your camera on. So you do have to be a teeny bit understanding.
In the Netherlands, there is no problem.
All right.
Really.
Well, you have
There's-
no issues. We
It's
do.
not a reason to not
Yes.
switch on your camera. There's
Oh,
enough
man.
bandwidth
I
everywhere.
like that one better than the makeup excuse. Oh,
I don't know. I've had a number of meetings here while I was in Prague, and basically I was on a call last night at 11 p.m. If anyone saw me outside the disco or wherever we were at, I was not smoking. I was actually on a big conference call, and they wanted me to turn my camera on, and it was a 3G connection. I say, the camera doesn't work, but I was all set up with that brick background outside in my winter coat.
Well, now let's talk specifically about Teams now. Let's get into that. Let's say, so how has Microsoft Teams changed the way that your organization collaborates?
Well, in my organization, it's just me and a sheep, so that doesn't count.
Is the
And he
sheep
does
on
nothing
email?
anyway. He's just a mentor sheep. It's just a tax write-off, but
It's
anyway.
contextual buy.
It's your assistant.
But I mean, I'm a partner with all my clients. I mean, I'm in there with them, and in their organizations, I think something that's been great for me is that we all, and I won't call it lazy, but we're so busy to be able to navigate away to things and to have to go somewhere else to do something. The fact that Teams has fully brought that thing in where I can bring everything to me where I'm working, and that includes the people that I work with, like a virtual desktop or something. That's the most perfect thing for me. The biggest change that I've had is that people don't have to navigate all over, but they can bring everything to where they are when they need it.
Well, I've found that while it brings new technologies to the table, and some organisations and people struggle with that, the choice of which tool to use, the way that it's delivered in the Teams interface, it's almost you're agreeing that contract ahead of time, and then you're bringing the tools to the users. So even if they're using different tools in different teams that they're playing a part of, the tools that they are to use inside of that team are there and present. It's there on the tabs. It's there in the bot. So in a way, it guides the user to which is the right tool to use while I'm in this team. I found that provides clarity to users and makes them more efficient, so they don't spend their time reading documentation as to what I'm supposed to use at this time.
I think it also helps, teams could really, in our organization, it helped two ways. First of all, remote working becomes easier and easier, and it becomes like an accepted standard, right? So 10 years ago, we really had to ask your boss if it was okay, if you maybe could work from home a certain afternoon or a morning or whatever. Nowadays, it's not a problem anymore, not at all. So you can work wherever you want. So I think that's something I really like, because traffic is just getting heavier and heavier. And it's a waste of time to be in a car if you don't have an appointment at the office, so you can still work from home and be very efficient and effective. So that's something I really like. The second thing is, sharing knowledge has become way easier than it has been before. Because when we just had email or something similar, you would still, if I would have a question, I would have to kind of guess who in my organization would have the best answer for that particular question. And there's two things wrong here. First of all, maybe that is not the person with the best answer. Second of all, the question and answer is encapsulated in this email conversation, and there's no one else benefiting from that same conversation. So that's what I really like about Teams. First of all, if I ask a question, there's multiple people who can respond, and you can kind of distill the best answer to that question. And also, it's in the open, so other people that are interested or that maybe have a similar question later on, they can actually see what's happening there. So that's something that really changed.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I love email. I love email more than almost anything. There's only one thing better than email. That's an email with an attachment. I love attachments. But it really, in all honesty...
I don't know, my family rate's pretty high, email's down lower. That's me.
But that's Jeff.
No, I will say, this is like email confessional. Teams changed my life for the better. My email consumption is, I don't know, about half, but really close to half of what it used to be. Internally, I very rarely email any of my colleagues anymore. Everything is on Teams. To your point, I don't know, like if I'm actually searching Teams for information. I'm not finding experts on Teams, but I definitely see your point in certain teams within there. But I'm usually not searching Teams for answers.
No, it's maybe not as much as in searching for answers. It's more when there is a conversation happening and you are watching that conversation.
Do they mention you though? Because how would you do it otherwise? Because unless they're mentioning me, I never.
So sometimes we have a rule in our organization: you cannot expect for someone to have read a conversation if you didn't mention that person.
Agree.
That's one of the rules that we have with each other. Right, so there's something in there. But then there is channels with certain topics that I like, that I'm interested in, and I subscribe myself to these channels so that in my activity feed, whenever a new conversation is started in that channel, I get a notification, and then I go and check if that's a useful or interesting conversation for me, and I could either participate or just learn by reading that conversation.
Yeah. I have a question for you, Martin, because when you were describing the benefits of the knowledge transfer part, what you were describing is the community aspect of Yammer.
Exactly.
Expertise, location, knowledge transfer, to me, enterprise-wide, that's the sweet spot for Yammer. Whereas for Teams, that's the sweet spot for getting my work done.
Yeah.
And so I'm listening to, have you guys decided that we're creating open capital T teams?
We have used Yammer as well basically for the same thing,
okay.
But we are not that big of a company. We are 100 people, 100 consultants. So for us, it doesn't really make sense to have two platforms if we can have one and we can have the same effect. So basically we have one team where everybody in our organization is a member of. We have many other teams, but at least we have one team that we're using in a Yammer style.
Right.
So
and
yes,
a smaller company that would work.
Yeah. I actually still think what will change, I think, for everybody is the Yammer app in Teams, because there's an enormous difference between a team and a community. And could not agree more with Microsoft's decision to change the Yammer group name to communities, because that's how I always called them. And I always advise even small clients, and it'll be easier now to make that not having two places to go. But a community is much more fluid and open and will grow with you, and you choose to join out of interest. Where a team, you're a member because you're trying to get something done together.
But that's just, and that's us already kind of not disagreeing, but coming with other angles of things.
Right.
And that kind of comes back to what Cameron said about that thing about so many apps, and it's starting to make more sense because it can be in one place. And I mean, in my session, I spoke about too many apps as well, and people saying, I don't know when to use which app. So firstly, I'm saying, sorry. If that's still the case of happening, it means we haven't passed on enough knowledge for people to make better informed decisions, number one, okay? For me, number two, Teams and Office 365 and these things are not separate apps anymore. When I do change management and I help companies roll out Office 365 or Microsoft 365, it's one app for me with different features, because that's confusing for users. That's when it comes into that when to use what thing. So for me, Teams has become that front end or that portal, but I fully agree about the Yammer thing. So one of the features that I like using more in my Teams environment is adding Yammer as a tab previously, to be able to allow for that more knowledge sharing and loose conversations, where my Teams is always a little bit more structured and work focused, if that makes sense. So I keep my conversations and things clean work. I don't really do knowledge sharing there to that level because it just becomes too much content, and I keep Yammer specifically for knowledge sharing for the more informal nearly and bigger groups, which I then just add to Teams. But then for me,
I think the lines are going to get even more blurred with the announcements of the new integrations. So the Teams and Yammer integrations in with Outlook, for example. I mean, we heard, I don't know, 4 or 5 times throughout my career of the email killers. These apps that were going to come in and we're no longer going to be using email. It's never happened. I think there's still, now I think just about everybody has seen a dramatic reduction in the volume of email, but there are still, in my view, valid use cases and uses for that, especially when you have people that are not in any of these networks and you need to communicate with them. That's called email or phone.
How are you going to have a conversation with someone who's not in your organization? I mean, we're not going to kill email with this.
But even for those, as a notification vehicle, but to have the ability, and if you've not seen more about those announcements about these new integrations, I mean, some very exciting stuff that's coming that is, again, blurring the lines between these workloads, Yammer, Teams, and
they've
Outlook.
always been blurred, though. I mean, if you really think about it, where does SharePoint, stop, and where does Yammer start? Where does, to me, it's all in one. And I think that all of you guys that have a bad connotation when it comes to Yammer, and I know a lot of you do, I'm sure a lot of you are not even using Yammer. It's okay. It's going to change. It is definitely going to change, because when Microsoft bought Yammer, it was supposed to be the solution, right? Like the community component of it, but it just was not amazing experience. From what we're seeing, it is going to be an amazing experience where a lot of us are going to live, because the secret sauce to a successful internet, we all know, is community, right? And the Yammer component is definitely going to play a major factor in that, in my opinion.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
That was very nice. How much is Microsoft paying you, Josh?
I was also wondering if it's
I
a
applied
coin
for the
drop.
So I want a slightly different direction here. We've got about 20 minutes left here. And if anybody has some questions about some of the things that we're discussing, feel free. In fact, do we have microphones out somewhere? Just be very loud.
There is a
But-
mic there at the back.
Is there one? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to ask, kind of getting more into to the weeds of this. So what is the role of artificial intelligence? So thinking about AI and building and extending your hub for teamwork.
AI makes things easier, or is supposed to make things easier. I think that's the biggest benefit. And if it doesn't make things easier, then you're either using it wrongly, or maybe it needs to learn more or be trained more. But in the end, AI has to make things easier. I love the fact, for example, that when I book my flight through KLM, I get an email and Outlook tells me, hey, this looks like a flight, shall I put it in your calendar? That is the kind of AI that I love.
Absolutely.
That's just because it makes life easier. The same for a hotel booking or stuff like that. But if it's just something that doesn't make your life easier, then yeah, maybe it's not worth going down that path or change it.
Do you have some specific examples from the panel? Anybody of things that you've gone in and automated?
We talked about bots. I like bots, but only if they work.
They mostly don't.
So
They
there's too
usually
many.
don't.
Yeah, exactly,
Absolutely. They
exactly.
mostly
There's too many
don't.
bots out there that don't, that are not trained well, or they don't have the language understanding interface in between. So you have a list of frequently asked questions, and if you don't type in almost the exact question, then you will not find the answer. That's the kind of stuff that I think that does not work, and then people are like, this bot doesn't work, it's rubbish, I will
And then
just move on.
and then they never use it.
Exactly, I will move on and stop using this.
I've got a Microsoft Flow that deletes any emails from Jeff.
Can you share that with the community? Or?
As a template, absolutely.
So one of the things that I do like, for example, is the sentiment analysis tool in Azure AI. That's really, really useful. You can use that for, I don't know, Twitter sentiment analysis, or you can even use it for your Yammer sentiment analysis. We built something through Flow that picks up every Yammer message, passes it through the sentiment analysis tool, and you have a dashboard, a Power BI dashboard with the overall sentiment in your Yammer environment. We built that for a customer. That's super cool.
You know, remember when Microsoft told us that, hey, everyone's going to have to go to this Azure cloud, and everyone's like, no way, we are never going to the cloud ever. And now, I mean, how many clients are on Azure? And it's not if, but when. And that's how I look at AI right now. It's not if, but when. There are a lot of things that we do in our everyday life, like Martin just mentioned, that we're using AI and you don't realize it. And to Martin's point and Susan's point, chatbots are not nearly baked yet. So if you're using it, it's not amazing. Give it some time, it's going to get better.
You think of a lot of the features that we're seeing that Microsoft announces, little things like recent files, and that's, that has that intelligence, that AI-driven capability.
Design ideas in PowerPoint, people.
Right.
What? That's amazing.
I love
Yeah.
that.
Greatest thing ever.
Ever.
taught it to my-
PowerPoint tattoo,
Right.
PowerPoint
Wait, what was that?
tattoo.
You have a lot. What
Design
about
ideas
what about
in
using
PowerPoint.
snapping a photo of a table in a magazine article and it translating that into an Excel chart that you can manipulate the data? That's pretty dang cool.
Yeah.
Or you take a picture of a screen and it would actually go in the AI and turn that European SharePoint logo
To text.
into text
Yes.
that you can then type and edit and manage.
Or sorry.
No, jump in, Mark.
The voice translation into text of stream, also super cool. I hate it that it's not available in Dutch yet, but for international companies, when English is your language, awesome. You can suddenly search for spoken text.
Yeah,
I
that's
love
amazing.
it.
But I think that's the important thing, and I mean, that's always a big focus for me. We always take that big jump to the biggest, next best thing. But we forget about all these small little things that changes our lives every day. I mean, a silly thing that blows people's minds is dictation and Pro Plus. I mean, they don't even know it. They've skipped it for how long? For years, they don't even know that it's there. And I mean, that's for me a step towards AI. That's using where a robot doesn't take your job. That robot's supposed to take part of my job that annoys me. Okay, that's how it's going to work. I've got my own little robot, and that's going to free up time to drink wine. I mean, that's how it works.
I want that
That's
robot
goals.
too.
That's goals, life goals. Okay.
Yeah.
But we got to focus on those small things as well and make sure that end users know that, because it's those small little things. It's being able to use dictation will make that same end user who was afraid of IT before to then trust the bot. They don't take jumps like that. Make them trust the small things that's already there and use it and help them improve their lives, and then that adds value, I think.
Well, I think one of the most powerful things, because you see more and more organizations that are turning to video, as Gartner said, by like the end of 2020, that like over 80% of corporate intranets would be video-based content that would be in there. But the fact that you can do the automatic transcription and translation, which means that becomes part of the historical content of your knowledge for the organization. It means it's instantly searchable.
Searchable.
Yeah.
I think
that's
when we
amazing.
talk, I think when we talk about AI, people's minds just go to that futuristic, it's doing something that only a human could do. How is this possible? But I see that there's a lot of real value in, as Tracy was saying, the small things. So I see just automating, rules-based automation, offering a lot of value. And I'm not sure if you'd put that under the AI banner, but just automating repetitive tasks on a very simple rules-based thing that anyone can understand. It doesn't feel like AI, but it's where a lot of the value is being gained. And even a really simple thing that came in Outlook was the ability to, just when you drop down that attachment, it's the last file that you worked on anywhere, that one feature is just a massive time saver. You're off creating a file in some application, and then you're coming into Outlook, it's just, where did I save that? It's just having it right there on that button. Just tiny little things like that just change so many lives.
I also love getting the Cortana emails of, hey, yesterday you had these conversations, just following up, is there action that you need to take? I know if people are starting to see those emails come in. I love those. It's half the time they're not actual tasks.
Same for meetings, right? You had a meeting, you have a PowerPoint presentation that you fired up during the meeting, and the meeting ends in Teams, and then I get the question from PowerPoint, hey, you just shared this PowerPoint presentation, would you like to share it with the people that were in the meeting?
Yep.
I love it.
Yeah, that is fantastic.
That makes my life easier. I do love those emails. Many times I just delete them, but I like. Hey, you're traveling to Prague today. The temperature's going to be 32 degrees and sunny. Whatever it is, I like that.
I think it must be amazing when you're in a country where Cortana works.
Now, if it starts, I know.
I have to lie to every device in my home that it doesn't know that I'm in South Africa for things to work. But it's okay, it's working.
Just get little email reminders that say, if it looks like you're gonna be at a conference and AC will be there, bring Purell. Wash your hands several times after talking.
Absolutely.
Next question here is, so how do you define and measure success of your Hub for Teamwork? Intentionally broad. How do you define success, and then how do you measure that?
There's a total consultant's answer. It depends. But in every organization, it's different. Just like I was talking about in my session about what a good-looking intranet looks like, I might think is something completely different than Sue thinks. So I think that, to me, right, I put employees into 3 buckets. Those early adopters, people like you that are here with us today, you've got that third that are never ever going to go. They're going to continue to fax things. Then you've got that third that are the fence sitters. What's in it for me as the end user? We have to figure out what is going to get to that critical mass. In every organization, it's different. So to me, critical mass, 2/3 of the employees that are engaged, it's, for some organizations, it's a dream. But that's, to me, engagement, adoption of the technologies when you don't even realize you're using the technologies.
I do suggest to measure, just for the sake of that at least what's going on in your organization, and you can change your adoption strategy based on the numbers that you get from the measurements. I mean, the metrics are there. The basic metrics are there in the admin center. You can have a look at what people in your organization are using and how often they are using it. And if you see a dip somewhere, you can maybe scratch your head and think about, okay, maybe we should put some effort in this department, or maybe have some white glove treatment for this boss here, or at least pay some attention here. So you can change the way that you want your adoption strategy and increase usage.
I think that'll give you an indicator of where you may have issues, but it's not, to me, truly a measure of value. Because the only way to measure value in the business is with a business metric. And very often those are much more difficult to count. So I look at it from 2 perspectives. One, your organization already has KPIs. There's something that really matters to the organization. If we are going to introduce technology that we want the business to value, then we better be willing to take a piece of what we are already measuring, the big rocks for the organization, and say, hey, I can impact that big rock. We often try to tie our productivity things to we'll save people 15 minutes per person per day. We'll multiply that by the number of people. I mean, I want to gag when I see people.
I love those.
That is crap. Because what are those people doing at those 15 minutes? That doesn't drive executive behavior. I want their money. to invest in my solutions. So I need to speak their language. How are they measured? What do they care about? And I only have to take a small percentage of that existing KPI to be able to say, yes, I will commit to this big rock. I don't want to be number 11 on the top 10 things we're going to do this year. I want to make sure that when I speak about it, it's not 15 minutes per person per day. It's more proposals, happier customers.
It's the quantitative versus qualitative measurements.
I want
it's and it needs to be both. I mean, so you got to be careful not to get stuck in the idea. And here's an example back from my SharePoint admin days of monitoring the number of active users in various team sites, the volume of content number of files being uploaded, the size of those, who's accessing that content on a regular basis. And we would have that conversation of, why is this team so much more successful? I was like, because it has 3 times the number of people on that project. There's more activity, so that's not an accurate measurement. This other project that had little movement in the site didn't require heavy movement in that site. And so it was looking at it as an apple-to-apple comparison was just the wrong way. It wasn't truly measuring what was happening with those 2 projects.
Yeah, I completely agree with Susan. Employee engagement or employee retention is also one of those metrics.
Right,
that
retention
really,
is a great
really
metric,
Yeah.
by the way.
Yeah.
We found actually in my organization when I was running communities of practice that people who are members of communities, were 50% more likely to stay with the organization than people who were not members of a community.
Exactly.
And we were really starting to see really meaningful numbers. We had all these anecdotes about people saying, well, I didn't even know there was anyone else like me in the organization until we invited them to be part of a community of like-minded people.
Yeah, nice.
And so, I mean, again, if you want to do something that want to change people's behavior, make sure it is measured and people care about in the organization.
I think I just want to add to what Sue said as well. So that's true, because there's different things that you can measure or that's important, and some of them are not that tangible and not that easy to. I mean, happy employees, it's a very difficult thing to monitor, except for looking at how many people leave a company, etc. Okay, but something that's very, very important for me is, I mean, we can't measure any success if it's not documented, okay? And what I see a lot in companies is that a company will come up with a new strategy, like a 3-year strategy or new vision or something crazy, and they would say that they want this company to evolve, you know? This company is going to digitally transform. This company is to continue learning and to be ahead of the market. But they never, ever filter those strategies down to users' KPIs, which is exactly that problem, is that the job that I do every day, my KPIs is to capture 500 invoices. It's got nothing to do with the company's vision. But if we change KPIs of employees, if we rechange that with we all working towards the same goal and we all have a piece in the puzzle, then people buy into the vision of the company. So if the company's vision is to evolve, then we need to give an employee 1% or 2% of their time needs to be to learn to be able to evolve. But we're not allowing that. So that's why there's this misconnect or disconnect, because that's the measurement exists for management in board meetings, and that's where it stops. That's a challenge. So if we can bring that down, then we'll have a better metric as well, because then people realize that, like you said, working faster or achieving better ties in with a company vision, and we're all working towards a goal, and then it's more measurable, I'd say.
Do you find that like that human element plays into it? Because what we're talking about here is collaborating. It's a very human thing to communicate and to collaborate. And we can put the tools in place that can make them more efficient. We can, because we know that there's time saving in the tools, we can chase after them with a big stick and we can make them hit those KPIs. But is that sustainable if they're not satisfied with the tools that they're using? So that feedback loop of satisfaction, does that play into it more long term to make sure what we're trying to achieve is sustainable?
There's a metric that I've used often when I'm implementing this kind of technology, and what you ask, I call it the don't take it away metric. And we have a baseline expectation and ask people after they've been using the tool for 3 months, should we take it away? And what you're looking for is, and which is a really good value metric, because if they don't want you to take it away, then you know they're getting personal value from it. You cannot command this from the top. You really are going to have to deliver solutions that add value to me, the individual me's in the world. Because at the end of the day, everybody only cares about, it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. First, I'm the most important, solve a problem for me, and make my life easier, and then I'll focus on my team. And the last thing I'm thinking about is the organization. So if we want all these things to work, we need to make sure that when we train people, which I agree is critically important and often cut, and it's the biggest
for
mistake.
design,
right?
Because if it's pretty, they'll use it. Of
Right.
course.
You just can't assume that. You have to, and I don't want to train people in everything. I want to make them comfortable that they can get their jobs done.
But
I think that's a good segue, and I'm sure you can continue that thought with the question. Well, our last question here, we've got a few more minutes, but what are you doing to ensure adoption and engagement across your hub for teamwork?
oh, I was going to just answer that right now. Look at
There
me,
you go.
live ahead of times. So, and that kind of just ties back into what we said again. Is it a human thing? Why aren't they using it? Why do some things go wrong? Are people just resistant? And I definitely don't want to go into methodologies because it's boring. But if you think of change management, or you just think of ADCAR, where it says start with awareness, then desire, then the knowledge and stuff, a lot of times we don't do that. We were all guilty for years to throw technology at users. Monday, we roll out Teams because Jeff played golf with someone on Saturday, had a beer, and then they decided we're going to get Teams, and then we get it. That's how everyone got SharePoint, by the way. Someone played golf with someone who's got SharePoint, okay?
Same for SAP, by the way.
So, of course. But that's the thing is that
lot of golf.
if you don't create awareness, if you don't make people, if you don't communicate why this tool can help them and what was wrong in the past, where that can fix those things, but we just throw the tools at them and then we stand back and say, okay, let's see what they're going to do with it. Then of course it's going to fall. I mean, if those communications don't exist, if people don't understand that there's a gap, then they're not going to want to be better. If they don't understand that something didn't work as well, and this will help them do things better. But that's awareness campaigns. And sadly, I a lot of times just spend more time telling people at where they're sucking at the moment so that they understand how much better they can be in the future. But you have to look at the past to understand what the benefit in the future can be.
It's really showing that value for them to realise
Yeah.
what am I going to benefit from this change? Otherwise, why am I changing? I can do what I'm doing today. So
Right,
making
there's-
sure that
There's research data that says that a new tool has to be 9 times better than that with
That they
than
have.
which it is replacing in order to be
Oh, wow.
immediately adopted. We very rarely have that 9 times differential.
Teams
right.
over Skype.
Yeah,
That's like 100 times better.
in your
Is that a
opinion.
coin drop?
In my opinion.
But to each individual user, there's my favorite quote about change. Change is good. You go first.
Yeah.
So I think we need, because our technology, I'm sorry, are not 9 times better than whatever anyone is doing, which means we need to tell the stories.
Yes.
We need to demonstrate the value. I think one effective adoption approach is, I call it the When Harry Met Sally approach. I'll have what she's having. I mean, you need to find a team that is interested and engaged. Don't start with the people who are reluctant. Start with the people who want to be part of the solution and let their success demonstrate success for others. So when they're successful, another team will say, I think I would like
like
that.
FOMO.
Yeah,
too."
you want to drive down your training costs, find those champions, internally,
Right.
those users, make them part of that process. They will be the biggest advocates out there.
Why beat your head against a wall? Open the door.
Yeah.
Any
Wow,
other
that was
thoughts?
easy.
Anything else that you're doing around adoption and engagement? Any other examples?
I love having contests. I like, again, showing value. I don't want to use it just to use it. I want to use it to get value. And if they're not seeing value, I don't want to force it down their throats. I told you, everyone's not going to go. They're going to email. They're going to fax things. For the millennials, faxing is how we used to communicate a long time ago. And, if they don't see value in it, they're not going to go. So just always, like Sue said, what's in it for me? Can I not live without it? A lot of good tidbits today.
coming from the developer angle, a lot of what I speak about is sort of challenging developers within organisations to look at teams not just from bringing the Microsoft services together, focused on the tasks of a team, but look at your line of business systems and bringing those services into the context of a team. So just as you're seeing with all the Microsoft services, what we've done with Teams there is we're preventing users having to go out to the individual applications. So in the past, a conversation would have been had maybe in Skype, but then your files would have been in SharePoint, your tasks are in Planner, and you would have had to jump between the websites or the client applications for all these different tools, and remember, okay, when I'm in this project, when I'm in this team, this is where I find the files for that. So we've sort of brought that all together for Microsoft services inside of the Teams client, but then going with that same paradigm into other line of business systems that you've got, and really removing the clutter and just bringing the parts of those systems that team is concerned with. And by bringing those in, it drives adoption not only of people using Teams because they're getting more value out of it, but also can drive the adoption of your line of business systems as well. And again, guiding them. You've just joined a team. Not only are these the sort of the core collaboration services that we use, but these are also the line of business applications that we use when we're in that team as well.
Can I say it's also a great way to start surfacing shadow IT efforts as well? If you can have that conversation and say, look, there may be valid reasons why you are using this unapproved application. You might have needs that we just aren't providing you as IT, but provide that tool as a tab within Teams for that project so that it's at least visible and we're aware of that. And then you have that secondary conversation of, now what do we need to be doing as IT as an organization to meet these needs, or train those users using that unsupported tool on the right way of doing it, but don't stop the work, stop the productivity, and have them go around you. So it's been fantastic for that as well, which I think is in parallel to what you said. Well, so I know if we don't have any questions anybody has? Yeah, right here. The creation of teams, should there be a provisioning process or should it just be wide open?
I like the provisioning mechanism, not because I don't believe in letting people create teams whenever they want, because actually I do. So I like both. People should be able to create a team whenever they want. But if you use a provisioning engine, you can customize the team a bit already in the way that you want in your organization. You can have better naming conventions than the options that Microsoft provides, for example. Nowadays, you can create messages already in the channel, so you can create a welcoming message. Well, hey, welcome to your team. Make sure you watch this little video snippet, so you know how we use Teams. So leverage these things, and you do need a provisioning engine for that to work. So, but I do believe in opening it up and let people create the teams that they want.
You just need to make sure it acts fast.
Yes.
Because the minute you
Correct.
add time, that time gap, they're going to walk around another way.
Yeah.
I want everyone to create team, but everyone to create teams if they understand the purpose of teams, how it works, what happens in the background and stuff. Companies are not training people, which is why I have a problem with everyone just creating teams if they don't understand the impact. So if people have been trained or they are aware enough or they have the information to understand, when is a team a good thing to use? Because I have companies where users are creating teams because I think it's a folder to put documents in. Or I've just created another management reports for Monday team. I'm like, yeah, that's organic growth, people. Have you seen organic growth and file shares? I don't want that again. I'm sorry. So I'm fully for it as well, as to, in a way, but I want everyone to eventually. So by building that maturity and making sure that everyone understands when the tool works well. Because too much of a good thing is not a good thing. And that I've seen happen in too many companies. So I definitely agree with the statement. It's got to be fast. I agree. Don't cut and chop people's hands off. It shouldn't be an approval process. It should be a guidance. Someone shouldn't decide whether they get a team or not. You should give them enough information to guide them through the process to get it, absolutely.
Any final questions? Yeah, one over here.
Maybe one question. So when you're working in teams, and maybe you're talking or chatting with a colleague or anything like this, and then you have to search for something, maybe for a certain file or a certain... Thank you very much. So if you're searching for something while working in teams, is it something, and you're searching in Teams, do you already know what you expect there? And is it necessary to switch to maybe Office.com and then do there another search? So when it's about searching, what would be your strategy? And maybe the first question is, do you know what to expect when you search in Teams?
Yeah, the problem in searching in Teams is you can only search for conversation. Well, you can search for files, but only for file titles. It doesn't look inside files yet, and that's a problem. So if you're looking for a certain file, right now, I would suggest to go to indeed office.com or your SharePoint and search from there. That same search experience is coming to Teams though, so they are going to change that. But right now, it's a little bit of a messy experience. I agree.
Yeah. This is the one thing that's really hard to train people.
Yeah.
Because the context of search is a big issue in SharePoint as well. All of those search experiences are aligning. So that you'll be able to search from wherever and get contextually relevant search.
On your desktop, I mean, it's.
But we just
I
have
want
to
it right there.
Yeah, I mean, you just got to. We're not there yet, but Microsoft is fully aware how critical it is. In fact, there's 100 people in Oslo this week joining the former Fast Search team, focused on exactly these same issues. I mean,
Yeah, it's one of the top requested, or top internal discussions around Teams. Well, I know we're just over time, but thank you again to the panel for joining today. Thank you all for attending the session. Of course, everybody that you see up on stage here, we're all accessible. If you do have other questions, didn't want to bring it up in front of the crowd, come and talk to any one of us here or reach out to us after the conference. We're all very accessible through social, and those of us that use email will respond to emails as well. But enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.